You think you know Greek food. Feta, a bit of lamb, that white sauce, a plate smashed on the floor, somebody shouting opa. And then you sit down at an actual Greek table and discover that this is not a cuisine. It is a 3,000-year-old argument that happens to be delicious. Because almost every single thing on this table is claimed by at least 3 other countries, defended by every Greek grandmother as the one true version, and served with a side of national pride so intense that questioning the recipe is basically questioning the flag. Greek food is the Mediterranean's longest-running feud with a bay leaf in it. It is a cuisine of poor ingredients treated like treasure, of oil and lemon and open fire, of grandmothers who would genuinely rather you burst than leave a single plate unfinished, and of the absolute, unshakable certainty, held by every last person at the table, that their way is the only correct way and everyone else's mother did it wrong. So pull up a chair, because we are going to eat our way through the whole beautiful contested spread, one plate at a time, and nobody is getting out of here without offending somebody. Let's start where every Greek night out actually starts, which is standing on a street corner at 2 in the morning holding a gyros. This is the true king of Greek street food. Meat stacked on a vertical spit turning all day, shaved off in crispy strips and wrapped in a warm pita with tomato, onion, tzatziki, and this is the part that shocks the foreigner. A fistful of French fries thrown right inside the wrap. And here is where the trouble starts immediately, because you must be very careful in Greece to know the difference between gyros, the shaved spit meat, and souvlaki, the little skewers of grilled cubes, and calling one by the other's name marks you instantly as an outsider who does not belong. And here is the trouble underneath the trouble, the thing spoken about in lowered voices, which is that this exact vertical spit of shaved meat is also the Turkish doner and the Arab shawarma, 3 brothers born of the same fire. And the fastest way to end a friendly dinner is to suggest, out loud, which one came first. And within Greece it splits again by region and by animal, pork or chicken on the mainland. The little skewers called kalamaki in Athens and souvlaki almost everywhere else, so that the very same word means different things depending on which taverna you happen to be standing in, and everyone naturally assumes their local usage is the only correct one and everyone else is confused. The proper sit-down order is not the wrap at all, but the whole plate. The skewers pulled off the stick over a mound of fried potatoes, with grilled bread, raw onion, and a wedge of lemon, meant to be pulled apart by hand by a whole table talking over each other at once. The absurd little anchor is the fries inside the wrap, non-negotiable. A Greek would look at you with genuine pity if you left them out. And when you unwrap it on that corner at 2 in the morning, grease already soaking through the paper, you understand that whatever war it came from, it won. And there is a whole unspoken etiquette to it too. Whether you eat it standing at the counter or walking, whether you take the cooling tzatziki or the spicier sauces, whether you are willing to admit out loud that you have had 3, and every Greek city is quietly certain that its own gyros is the true benchmark against which all lesser, inferior foreign gyros must forever be judged and found wanting. And since the spit is already spinning, let's stay with the meat and go to the dish tourists think is the most Greek thing in the world, moussaka, that towering casserole of layered eggplant, potato, spiced minced lamb, and a thick golden blanket of bechamel on top, baked until it sets into architecture you can slice. It looks ancient, it feels like something Homer ate, and here is the quiet secret that Greeks do, not always advertise, that the creamy bechamel top, the thing that makes moussaka, was popularized barely a century ago by a chef who studied in France and decided Greek food needed a little tidying up. So the most iconic Greek dish is partly a French makeover, and every grandmother makes hers differently and is certain the others are doing it wrong. Some with cinnamon, some without, some sneaking in a layer of zucchini. The anchor is that bechamel lid, the golden roof of the whole building. And the beautiful contradiction is that a dish half the country would call the soul of its cuisine is, underneath, a monument to how Greek food never stopped borrowing and arguing and improving. It even has a near-identical sibling, pasticcio, the very same idea built on thick tubes of pasta instead of eggplant, and the two of them together are the twin pillars of every Sunday oven, every christening, and every wake, the dishes that take a whole afternoon to build in layers and fill the entire house with the smell of cinnamon and lamb, so that the neighbors know exactly what you are having before they are even invited. And you cannot put down that fork without talking about the ingredients sitting on almost every plate so far. Feta, the brined white cheese that Greece loves so fiercely it took the entire European Union to court, and won the legal right to say that if it was not made in Greece, from Greek sheep and goats, then it is not feta, it is just some white cheese. Pretending. That is how seriously they take it. Feta goes on the salad, in the pie, on the watermelon, crumbled over the fries, baked in foil with honey and chili, and Greeks eat astonishing amounts of it per person, more than almost anyone on earth. The anchor is that legal war, the idea of a country going to court over the name of a cheese and winning. And the humanizing truth is that they fought that hard because feta is not really an ingredient to them. It is a birthright, the taste of every table they ever sat at. It comes in far more forms than the outside world suspects. Sharp and crumbly from sheep, softer and milder, baked in foil until it goes molten and almost sweet, fried in a pan until it blisters and browns, and a Greek can tell you within a single bite whether it was made properly and whether it came from the right animals grazing the right hills, a verdict delivered with the confidence of a wine critic and the emotional stakes of a family honor. And of course, the most famous home of that feta is the Greek salad, the horiatiki. And here we have to clear up the single greatest crime committed against Greek food abroad, which is putting lettuce in it. A real horiatiki, a village salad, has no lettuce, none. It is tomatoes, cucumber, onion, green pepper, olives, a mountain of oregano, and then, crucially, a whole thick slab of feta laid on top like a paving stone. Not crumbled, not diced. A slab drenched in olive oil so good you drink the leftovers with bread. The anchor is that intact block of feta sitting on top of the whole thing, and if you get it crumbled, you are eating a tourist salad. And the lovely part is how little there is to it. Because when your tomatoes taste like the sun and your oil comes straight from your uncle's own trees, you do not need to do a single thing else. It began, like almost everything here, as poor food, whatever the garden happened to give you, and a lump of cheese to turn it into a meal, and it never needed to become anything grander, which is exactly why it is still the plate that tastes most like a Greek summer, oregano and oil, and a warm afternoon that refuses to end. And underneath every single one of these plates, quietly holding the whole meal up, is bread, because Greece runs on it. The morning starts with a kouleri, a ring of bread crusted in sesame sold from carts on every city corner for small change. Or a tyrapita, a warm cheese pastry in that same endless filo, grabbed on the way, to work with one hand. The village bakery, the Fornos, is one of the oldest hearts of any neighborhood, and around Easter and every feast day it turns out special breads, sweet and plated and studded, each region deeply certain that its own loaf is the only proper one. The anchor is that sesame ring eaten while walking down the street at 8 in the morning, already late. And bread here is never merely bread. It is the thing you tear to scoop, to wipe, to gesture with while you argue. The humble tool that makes the whole shared elbow-to-elbow reach across the table way of eating possible in the first place. If you are enjoying this slow demolition of everything you thought you knew about Greek food, this would be the moment to hit like or subscribe. And I say it with no pressure at all, the way a Greek host sets a fourth plate of food in front of you that you did not ask for and cannot refuse. You are going to leave this table full whether you like it or not, so you may as well subscribe on the way. And we carry on, because we have barely touched the sweets, and the sweets are where the real war lives. Because now we arrive at baklava, and baklava is the single most dangerous word you can say in this entire region. Layer upon layer of paper-thin filo, crushed nuts, and enough honey syrup to glue your fingers together, cut into little diamonds of pure sugar. It is glorious, and it is claimed with total, unshakable conviction by Greeks and by Turks and by half a dozen countries in between, each certain it is theirs and theirs alone. A dessert so contested that it has genuinely featured in national arguments far bigger than dessert. The anchor is the filo itself, dozens of translucent sheets brushed with butter by hand, a technique the whole Eastern Mediterranean shares, and each corner insists it perfected first. And the honest, slightly uncomfortable truth is that baklava belongs to an entire shared world, the old Ottoman table that these nations lived on together for centuries. And the reason they fight over it so hard is that they all grew up loving it in exactly the same way. And it does not travel alone, because right beside it sits katifi, the very same nuts and syrup wrapped in strands that look like shredded wheat, and a whole family of syrup-soaked cousins, all of them wheeled out for weddings and name days and every celebration that counts, because in this part of the world you simply do not mark a happy occasion without something dripping in honey on the table. And the eternal argument, once you somehow get past which country invented it, is whether the syrup should be honey or plain sugar, whether it is served warm or cold. And that one is not getting settled in your lifetime or anyone else's. And speaking of things the Greeks share with a certain neighbor and would prefer you not point out, let's talk about the little cup of coffee that ends every meal. Greek coffee. Thick, strong, unfiltered, boiled up in a tiny long-handled pot called a briki until it foams. Poured grounds and all into a small cup you sip slowly and never ever stir to the bottom. It is, and everyone at this table knows it, precisely the same coffee that just across the water is called Turkish coffee. Made the same way, in the same pot, And after a certain painful stretch of history, the Greeks quietly renamed it. And now you order a Greek coffee, and you do not make a thing of the resemblance. The anchor is the sludge of grounds, left in the bottom of the cup, which you flip onto the saucer so someone's aunt can read your fortune in the shapes it leaves. And there is something very human in it, a whole nation drinking a shared history every afternoon and simply choosing what to call it. And you have to order it correctly, because the sweetness is decided before it ever boils. Sketo with no sugar, metrio with a little, glyco sweet. And there is no fixing it once it reaches the cup. It belongs to the cafeneo, the old village coffee house where men have sat arguing about politics and football and each other over a single cup for 3 hours since the beginning of time, nursing it slowly because the point was never the coffee, the point was the sitting. The young have their own versions now, the frappe and the freddo, cold and frothy and just as Greek. But the little cup of sweet sludge is still the one that ends the meal and starts the fortune-telling. And back at the savory end, no Greek table exists without tzatziki, that cool dip of thick strained yogurt, grated cucumber squeezed dry, garlic, olive oil, and a little dill that goes on the gyros, next to the grilled meat, on the bread, on basically everything. The anchor is the garlic, and specifically the amount of it, because a proper tzatziki is made by someone who has decided your breath is not their problem, and they are right. And it is the perfect example of the whole cuisine, a handful of humble ingredients, yogurt and a cucumber, turned into something you would cross a whole city for. It also sits at the head of a whole family of cousins on the meze table, and half the quiet skill of a Greek host is knowing exactly which dip belongs next to which grilled thing, an unwritten map of the table that everyone somehow follows and nobody was ever formally taught. And, to understand the beating heart of all of it, you have to see a Greek Easter, when the whole country roasts a whole lamb on a spit turning slowly over coals for hours in every yard and every village square, the single biggest meal of the year. Before it, at midnight, they break the long fast with majoritza, a soup made from the parts of the lamb you would rather not think about, offal and greens in an egg lemon broth, eaten in the dark after church. The anchor is the whole animal on the spit, an entire family taking turns to crank it, arguing about the fire. And it is the moment the food stops being food and becomes the calendar itself, the thing that gathers everyone who left the village back to it once a year. Alongside the lamb turns the kokoretsi, the organs and intestines wrapped tightly around the spit and roasted until they crackle, a delicacy the squeamish tourist quietly edges away from and the locals will genuinely fight over. There is the tsureki, a sweet braided bread scented with strange warm spices you cannot quite place. And the eggs dye deep blood red and cracked against each other in a little duel at the table where the last uncracked egg wins its holder good luck for the whole year. It is less a meal than the entire culture pressed into one long, smoky, wine-soaked afternoon. And because half of Greece is islands and the other half is coastline, you cannot talk about this food without the sea. Walk into a Sero Taverna, a fish tavern, right on the water, and you do not really order from a menu. You walk over to the ice, point at the whole fish you want, and they weigh it in front of you and grill it whole, with nothing but oil, lemon, and oregano. Because the iron rule of Greek seafood is that if the fish is good, you would not dare hide it under a sauce. There is fried calamari in light golden rings. There are tiny fried smelt eaten whole, head and all. There are sea urchins split open and eaten raw with a squeeze of lemon and a shot of ouzo beside them. The anchor is that walk over to the ice to choose your own fish by eye, priced by the kilo, a small friendly negotiation that is already half the meal. And it is the purest expression of the whole cuisine, the deep and slightly stubborn belief that the highest form of cooking is knowing exactly when to leave a perfect thing completely alone. And around all of these giants orbit the smaller plates, the meze, the little dishes that cover a Greek table until you cannot see the wood. Spanakopita, the spinach and feta pie wrapped in that same crackling phyllo, cut into squares and eaten warm or cold at any hour. Dolmades, vine leaves rolled, tight around rice and herbs, another dish claimed across the whole old empire, eaten cold with a squeeze of lemon. Tarama salata, the pale pink dip of cured fish roe whipped with bread and oil, that the rest of the world only meets at Christmas and Greeks eat whenever. Saganaki, a slab of cheese fried hard in a little pan and sometimes set on fire at the table with a shout, which is exactly as fun as it sounds. Keftedes, the herby fried meatballs, and lukanaiko, the coarse village sausage often scented with orange peel and fennel. Bugatsa in the morning, a warm custard or cheese pastry dusted with sugar and cinnamon and cut up with scissors. And behind all of it, the whole endless world of pies of every possible filling wrapped in that phyllo. Because a Greek will put very nearly anything inside pastry and confidently call it lunch. Grilled octopus, hung out to dry on lines by the harbor in the sun, then charred and dressed in oil and eaten with a glass of something strong, while you look at the sea. And that something strong is usually ouzo, the anise spirit that turns milky white the second you add water and tastes of licorice and holidays. Or retsina, the wine flavored with pine resin that genuinely tastes like drinking a forest and that you either love or spend the entire evening being very politely quiet about. And still, the little plates keep coming, because the Greek table is built on generosity as a form of gentle pressure. There is fava, the smooth, warm, yellow split pea puree topped with raw onion and oil. There is melitzana salata, the smoky eggplant dip that is the Greek cousin of every eggplant dip for 1,000 miles in every direction. There are gigantes, giant white beans baked slow in tomato and herbs until they turn creamy. There is horta, simply wild greens boiled and drenched in lemon and oil, the actual taste of the hillside. There is gamista, tomatoes and peppers hollowed out, stuffed with herby rice, and baked until they slump. And there is always bread, always, to push it all around the plate, and to wipe up the pool of oil at the bottom of every single dish, because leaving that oil behind would be a quiet insult to the tree it came from. And no two Greek islands will ever admit to cooking the same way, which brings us to Crete, the big island in the south that is quietly convinced it is the true heart of Greek food, and, infuriatingly for everyone else, has the science on its side, because the old Cretan diet of wild greens, beans, oil, and very little meat is one of the healthiest ways of eating ever measured, and the Cretans have the long, stubborn lives to prove it. Their signature is dakos, a hard barley rusk soaked just enough and piled high with grated tomato, crumbled cheese and oil, a poor shepherd's plate turned into an icon. They drink raki, which they insist on calling tsikoudia, a fierce clear spirit poured at the end of every meal and the start of every friendship, and they will, with total seriousness and a warm smile, serve you snails. The anchor is that rock-hard rusk that would break your teeth bone dry and turn silky and perfect under a ripe summer tomato. And every other island, from Santorini with its tiny intense sweet tomatoes and its fava, to 100 islands you have never heard of, insists in exactly the same proud way that its own version is the real Greece, which is, when you think about it, the single most Greek thing of all. And you cannot leave the table, you are not allowed, until the sweets and the last small plates have done their rounds. Loukoumaidas, little balls of fried dough soaked in honey and cinnamon, said to be among the oldest desserts in the world, once handed to winners of the ancient games. Galactobareko, a custard baked in phyllo and drowned in syrup, because if there is phyllo and there is syrup, the Greeks will find a way. Avogolemino, that magical egg and lemon mixture that becomes a soup or a sauce and shows up whenever something needs to taste like a grandmother made it. Keftides, herby little fried meatballs that vanish off the plate before they reach the table. Fasolata, the humble bean soup that Greeks will quietly tell you is the real national dish, the everyday food of the whole country long before the tourists arrived asking for moussaka. And the strained yogurt drizzled with honey and walnuts that the entire planet now buys in plastic tubs, next to olive oil so central to this cuisine that Greece pours more of it per person than anywhere else on earth. And the sweets keep their own calendar too, because at Christmas the whole country splits into two loyal and irreconcilable camps. The melomacarona, soft biscuits soaked in honey and spice, against the kourabides, crumbly butter cookies buried alive in powdered sugar. And every family swears total allegiance to one and merely tolerates the other on the same plate. There are dipples, thin ribbons of dough fried and folded and drowned in honey for weddings. And the spoon sweet, a single glistening piece of fruit preserved in syrup, offered to any guest who walks through the door alongside a glass of cold water, because you are not leaving this house without something sweet. That is simply and permanently not how it is done here. And the honey itself is a matter of fierce national pride. Thyme honey from bees that worked the wild, dry hillsides all summer, poured thick over strained yogurt or straight over a handful of walnuts. The oldest sweet there is, older than sugar, older by far than most of the recipes it now crowns. And that, more or less, is the Greek table, if you can even call it one table, because every single thing on it is loved beyond reason, argued over without end, and shared, whether anyone admits it or not, with all the neighbors these islands and mountains spent centuries tangled up with. Nobody here agrees on whose baklava came first, whether the bechamel counts, or what you are legally allowed to call the coffee, and everybody is completely certain that their grandmother made all of it better than yours did. It all came, in the end, from the same place, from poor kitchens and good oil and a coastline that fed people for thousands of years, and it turned into the most passionately defended food in the Mediterranean. It fed empires and shepherds and sailors and grandmothers. It survived every hard century and every occupation by stubbornly refusing to stop being generous. And it turned scarcity itself into a table so crowded with little plates that you cannot see the wood underneath. We could keep going until sunrise, plate after plate, argument after argument, and honestly they would let us. And that's just how they eat. Hit like, subscribe, and somebody's yeah will make you a plate.